The word Herod occurs 43 times in the New Testament, but it isn't all the same person. There were multiple rulers named Herod who appear in the New Testament. I don't know about you, but it can be easy to get them mixed up. Confusion is common because they share the same family name, but they ruled at different times and places. In the last episode, we explored the life of Herod the Great, who was the first Herod and the beginning of the Herodian dynasty. Today, we're going to examine his descendants, the other Herods, and see how their lives intersected with well-known New Testament stories. To learn more, join me for today's episode of All Things Apostolic. Herod the Great had a number of wives. Let's look at a very simplified form of his family tree, and then we'll examine the key descendants that are mentioned in the New Testament. From his wife Doris, he had Antipater. From Mariamne I, he had Alexander and Aristobulus. From Mariamne II, he had Philip I. From Malthace, he had Archelaus and Antipas. And from Cleopatra of Jerusalem, not the Egyptian ruler, he had Philip II. So Herod the Great had multiple sons by multiple wives. Within the royal court of Herod the Great, there was a lot of rivalry. Herod's paranoia led him to execute at least 3 of his sons, according to Josephus. All 3 at different times were in line for succession, but fell victim to Herod. So looking at the family tree, 3 potential heirs were removed even before Herod died. Alexander and Aristobulus, the sons of Mariamne I, were killed for supposedly plotting a conspiracy against their father. Later, just days before Herod's death, he killed his eldest son Antipater based on a supposed plot to poison him. Ironically, Antipater had helped to accuse Alexander and Aristobulus, and then he was eventually killed. Now, even though Aristobulus was killed, he did have descendants who are mentioned in the New Testament, and we'll get back to their part of the story in just a little bit. After the death of Herod the Great, 3 of his sons became rulers. The 2 sons from Malthace, Archelaus and Antipas, and then Philip from Cleopatra of Jerusalem. Rather than having a king of the Jews, the Romans set a governor and had different rulers over different areas. Philip II, Archelaus, and Antipas became rulers in different regions. Philip II was a tetrarch who ruled for about 38 years. In the New Testament, he's only mentioned in Luke chapter 3, verse 1, when the Bible talks about the different rulers at the time when John the Baptist began his ministry. Luke mentions Tiberius, the second Roman emperor, Pontius Pilate, who was the governor of Judea, Herod Antipas, who was the tetrarch of Galilee, and we'll talk about him in a minute, and his half-brother, Philip. Philip is often regarded as a more just and moderate ruler compared to his brothers, Herod Antipas and Archelaus. I should say half-brothers. Philip is credited with maintaining relative peace and stability in his territories. Philip's administration was marked by a degree of Hellenization, as evidenced by his founding of the city of Caesarea Philippi, named in honor of the Roman Emperor Caesar Augustus and himself. This city became a significant center in the region and is mentioned in the Gospels as a place where Jesus asked his disciples about his identity. After King Herod's death, his son from Malthace, Herod Archelaus, ruled over Judea, Samaria, and Idumea for about 10 years. Archelaus is mentioned in Matthew chapter 2. After Herod the Great died, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream in Egypt and told him to return to Israel with his family. And he arose and took the young child and his mother and came into the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus did reign in Judea in the room of his father Herod, he was afraid to go thither. Notwithstanding, being warned of God in a dream, he turned aside into the parts of Galilee. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene. So Archelaus' reputation for tyranny led Joseph to settle in Galilee. Archelaus' brother, Herod Antipas, ruled as Tetrarch of Galilee and Perea under Roman authority for more than 40 years. Antipas never held the title king, but he governed instead as a client ruler. Like other client rulers, he was responsible for maintaining order, collecting taxes, and promoting Roman interests in his territories. Herod Antipas is best known for his imprisonment and execution of John the Baptist after John publicly condemned Antipas's marriage to Herodias, the former wife of his half-brother. And this is where the relationships get a little complicated, so let's unpack this. As I mentioned previously, with his wife Mariamne I, Herod the Great had two sons, Alexander and Aristobulus. Before he was killed by his father, Aristobulus had 3 children. One of them was Herod Agrippa I, and another was a girl named Herodias, which is a feminine form of Herod. So just as an aside, Herod was a name, but it also functioned somewhat as a title for members of the Herodian dynasty. Aristobulus' daughter, Herodias, married her uncle, Philip I, who was a half-brother to her father, Aristobulus. And this is a different person than Philip the Tetrarch, who was also a half-brother to her father. Philip I, who Herodias married, was from Mariamne II, and Philip the Tetrarch was from Cleopatra of Jerusalem. From Herodias' marriage to Philip I, she had a daughter named Salome. Historians indicate that Herod Antipas, another uncle, and Herodias had an affair of sorts while her husband Philip was visiting Rome. Herodias then agreed to leave her husband in order to become the wife of Herod Antipas. Whether it was motivated by lust or simply a power play, the new marriage was not honorable, and John the Baptist publicly denounced their adultery in Matthew 4:14. Herodias held a grudge against John and wanted him to be executed. Herod Antipas put John in prison, but did not put him to death, in part because he was afraid of the people who believed John was a prophet. Herod Antipas also seemed to believe that John was a righteous man. Most of us are familiar with the story in Matthew 14, in which Herodias' daughter Salome danced for Herod at his birthday celebration. And again, this would be Herod Antipas. And when Herod promised to give her whatever she asked, she was coached by her mother to ask for the head of John the Baptist on a platter. Our focus today isn't on Herodias, but I'll mention that it's interesting how she hated John the Baptist and plotted against him. In a way, she's kind of like Jezebel, who hated and opposed the prophet Elijah. And John the Baptist had come in the spirit of Elijah, and he faced opposition from Herodias, like Elijah had faced it from Jezebel. So kind of an interesting comparison there as a side note. Jesus referred to Herod Antipas in Mark chapter 8 when he told his disciples to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. Herod Antipas was also in the trial narrative of Jesus. When Pontius Pilate learned Jesus was from Galilee, he sent him to Herod Antipas, who questioned Jesus, but ultimately mocked him and returned him back to Pilate without judgment. Of the many references to Herod in the Bible, a lot of them refer to Herod Antipas. Some of the scriptures where you'll find Herod Antipas are in Matthew 14, Mark 6, Mark 8, and Luke chapters 3, 8, 9, 13, and 23. And he's also mentioned in Acts 4 and Acts 13. Politically, Herod Antipas sought to strengthen his rule through urban development and loyalty to Rome. He founded the city of Tiberias on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee, naming it after Emperor Tiberius, and made it his capital. Despite these efforts, his reign ended in disgrace. Herodias convinced Herod Antipas to go to Rome to see the emperor and try to secure the title of king. But instead, he was accused of conspiracy against Rome, and Caligula banished him. He was accused by his own nephew, the brother of Herodias, Herod Agrippa I. Antipas was deposed and exiled by Caligula in AD 39. So even though Aristobulus was executed by his father Herod the Great, he had a daughter, Herodias, who married her uncle Philip I, and then got involved with another uncle, Herod Antipas. And then it was her own brother, Herod Agrippa I, the son of Aristobulus, whose accusations led to the banishment of Herod Antipas. After various changes in fortune, Herodias' brother Herod Agrippa I eventually gained the favor of the emperors Caligula and Claudius to such a degree that he gradually obtained the government of all Palestine with the title king. Luke simply referred to him as Herod, and Josephus referred to him as Agrippa. In the New Testament, you'll find this Herod is mentioned multiple times, but just in the book of Acts, chapter 12. He ordered James, the apostle, the son of Zebedee, to be killed, and he ordered Peter to be cast into prison. Soon after, he died at Caesarea in AD 44. Acts chapter 12 explains it this way. And upon a set day, Herod, arrayed in royal apparel, sat upon his throne and made an oration unto them. And the people gave a shout, saying, It is the voice of a God, and not of a man. And immediately the angel of the Lord smote him, because he gave not God the glory, and he was eaten of worms, and gave up the ghost. Herod Agrippa had accepted being viewed as divine by the people, and because of his human pride, he was struck down. And it ended a wave of persecution against the early church. Herod Agrippa's son, known as Herod Agrippa II, was 17 when his father died. He was the great-grandson of Herod the Great. In AD 48, he received from Claudius Caesar the government of Chalcis. He was given the authority to appoint the Jewish high priests, including the care and oversight of the temple at Jerusalem. 4 years later, Claudius took from him Chalcis and gave him instead a larger dominion with the title of king. In AD 53, Nero gave him oversight of even more territory, including Tiberias. Herod Agrippa II is mentioned several times in the New Testament in Acts chapters 13, 23, 25, and 26. It was Herod Agrippa II who listened to Paul's defense in Acts chapter 26, and he is famous for having responded, Almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. Agrippa recognized that Paul had done nothing worthy to be imprisoned or killed, but he couldn't let Paul go because Paul had appealed to Caesar. Herod Agrippa II ruled the northern territories until around AD 100. From Herod the Great to Herod Agrippa II, there were 4 generations of Herodian rulers lasting for more than 100 years, which had a huge impact on the Greco-Roman Jewish world prior to Jesus, during his life, and during the early growth of the church. The Herodian dynasty played a significant role in the New Testament narrative, intersecting with the lives of John the Baptist, Joseph and Mary, Jesus, Peter, Paul, and more. Most of us are familiar with Herod the Great, but I hope this episode helps a little bit to clear up the confusion with all of the other Herods in the Bible. Thank you for joining me for today's episode of All Things Apostolic. And until next time, take care and God bless.